Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your thumbs up, for your comments, and thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. And yes, we are commanded to love one another, whether we want to or not, or whether we agree with each other or not. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's about time for us to get some things straight. We ain't getting ready to play with nobody when it comes to Black American excellence. These people who are coming over here, these black immigrants, they are failures compared to Black Americans' success. And it's about time we set the record straight. And that's what I'm here for. Let's start with this.
Why do you think it is that a country like Jamaica or Africa, where they too have had their deprivations, had their colonialism, had their slavery, why do they go somewhere and tend to excel amongst people who also have gone through it?
Because you're not comparing like with like. That's why.
Okay.
A lot of us think we are comparing like with like. You're not. Let me explain. Generally speaking, Caribbeans in America, not the ones in the Caribbean, but the ones in America, will represent the top 10%.
I see.
So if you're really going to compare like with like, you have to compare the top 10% of Caribbeans with the top 10% of African Americans.
Okay.
And when you compare the two, the African Americans are slaughtering us, bro. It's not even close. It's a massacre. But what it is we compare the top 10% with your average African American. You're not comparing like with like. And if you compare your average African American, you're 51, you've got 1 to 100 and Mr. number 51. Number 51 is richer by a factor of 20 than your average Jamaican.
Okay, was that clear enough? When you compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, Black Americans slaughter them in every category. And I'm glad this man, and I believe he's Jamaican or somewhere or from somewhere in the Caribbean, I'm glad he pointed that out. We shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to do this. We should be proud of each other's success. But since they want this fight and they brought it to us, let's do the damn thing. Okay, let's start from the top. Let's look at the wealth of Black America. And this is from Microsoft Copilot. You know, I rely on the Copilot. It's AI, but it's factual. As of 2025, Black Americans hold approximately 3.4% of the total U.S. wealth, despite making up over 12% of the population. This reflects a persistent racial wealth gap that has widened in recent years. Now, they don't ever tell why there is such a racial wealth gap in the United States. They don't factor in 246 years of slavery where black people weren't generating any wealth, and another 89 years of Jim Crow where black people weren't generating any wealth but white people were. Still, let's look at the key figures. Total U.S. wealth is estimated at over $150 trillion. Of that amount, 5.1 trillion belongs to Black Americans. That's our share. And the buying power is projected to reach 1.98 trillion in 2025, up from 1.4 trillion in 2019. According to Black Enterprise, it's projected to be at $2 trillion in 2025. So that is the wealth and the buying power of Black Americans. So let's look at sub-Saharan Africa's wealth, because that's who's over here running their mouth. Sub-Saharan Africa's total wealth is estimated to be in the range of $6 to $7 trillion based on purchasing power parity and natural capital assets. This figure includes not just economic output, but also the value of natural resources, infrastructure, and human capital. So they're including the natural resources that the people really don't even have access to as a part of their total wealth. And we don't have that, they didn't include any kind of natural resources in our wealth. I don't know that they even included the land. Black Americans own over 3 million acres of land in the United States. I'm not sure that they even included that, but they did with the Africans. But even so, there are 43 million of us, and we have a total wealth of $5.1 trillion. There are 40 countries, 980 million of them, and they have between 6 and 7 trillion, including natural resources. So black Americans still come out on top. We're still wealthier. 43 million, 5.1 trillion versus 980 million, six between 6 and 7 trillion. You understand? Now, to do a quick review, the buying power for Black Americans for 2025 is projected to be between 1.98 and $2 trillion. For Sub Saharan Africa, the projected spending power for 2025 is 1.9 trillion US dollars. Okay, so they have 6.68 trillion international dollars. And I said, no, I want you to give it to me in American dollars because that's what we're working in. And so they came back and said their projected spending power for 2025 is $1.9 trillion. Ours is between 1.98 and $2 trillion. We still come out ahead, even though there are only 43 million of us and 980 million of them. Okay? You understand? Okay, let's break down the billionaires. And the only reason I'm doing this is because the other night I was listening to probably Tariq Nasheed, and an African called in and said there were more African billionaires than there were American billionaires, and that's a lie. And so I went back to the co-pilot to see what was going on there. There are 12 Black American billionaires. Not listed here is Sheila Johnson. She's back on the list. Now, Kanye West claims to be back on the billionaire list, but according to Forbes magazine, he's not. So I'm not counting him. There are 9 African billionaires and 3 Caribbean. Rihanna, a guy from a Haitian and a Jamaican. Um, and I'm not going to try to pronounce their names, but there are 3 Caribbeans, 12 Black Americans, and 9 Africans. So we win again. And by the way, there are 34 million Black Caribbeans. In this particular study, I didn't really go deeply with the Caribbeans because they're not doing the most talk. But it's not going to be any different. They're not going to fare any better than the Africans. But if you want me to focus on the Caribbeans in another video, I will do that. So moving right along. So next I asked the co-pilot who had the greatest cultural impact globally, Black Americans or Africans. And this is what the co-pilot said. Y'all pay close attention to this now. Black Americans have an outsized impact on global pop culture, especially in the 20th and 21st centuries. Music genres like jazz, blues, rock, hip hop, R&B, and gospel all have Black American roots. These styles have become global phenomena, influencing artists from Korea to Brazil. Now you can see Koreans doing gospel, they're doing hip hop, they're imitating Black Americans. And you know what they say? Imitation is the highest form of flattery. So first it's the music. Then it says fashion and style, the influence that Black Americans have on global fashion and style, including the streetwear, sneaker culture, and the aesthetics of cool, often traced back to Black American communities. Media and entertainment, Hollywood films, TV shows, and sports stars like Michael Jordan and Beyonce have global reach. Language and slang. African American vernacular English has influenced internet slang and youth language worldwide. Black American culture has always been one of America's greatest exports, says Mark Anthony Neal, professor at Duke University. So you see, we're just 43 million in the United States of America, and we have this kind of global impact. Now let's look at what the co-pilot says about African cultural influence. African culture's influence is deeper in history and more foundational to global civilization. So, ancient civilizations, Egypt, Nubia, Mali, and others contributed to writing, mathematics, medicine, and architecture. Now, we're talking about ancient civilizations back in the BC days and the early common era days, not modern. See, when we talk about black Americans, we're talking about modern black Americans. They're talking about ancient, which means the modern haven't done anything of note. But let me carry on. Spirituality and philosophy. African belief systems like ancestor worship and animism have shaped religious practices across the diaspora. Now, I don't know about animism in African worship. Now, based on what I read, animism is decentering God as the creator of the universe and believing that animals and plants and even inanimate objects have a soul. So, I don't know who does that. I don't know anybody that worships that way. Art and design. African masks, sculptures, and textiles have inspired movements like Cubism and modern design. Now, I will give credit to the sculpture, the Benin sculptures, the Benin soldiers. Those are exquisite. They are beautiful. But those things were done when we were still in Africa. So modern Africans don't even get credit for that. Cuisine and agriculture. Staples like coffee. Coffee came from Ethiopia. Watermelon and cola nuts have global roots in Africa. Okay, so we absolutely thank them for coffee and watermelon. Then it says diasporal influence. African traditions spread through migration and trade, influencing cultures in Latin America, the Caribbean, and beyond. So, again, we're talking about ancient civilizations when everybody was still over there, when we were still over there in Africa, wonderful things happened. But when you talk about modern Africans, okay, I'm just saying, let's just keep it a buck. They're the ones coming over here bragging. So, what have you done for us lately is what we're asking. So, who has more influence? That was the original question that I asked. And this is what the co pilot says: it's not a competition, it's a complementary legacy. Black Americans more visible in modern pop culture and media. Africans more foundational in shaping ancient and traditional global systems. Both have shaped the world in profound ways. One is the echo of centuries old civilizations, the other is the rhythm of contemporary global cool. So, in other words, one is living in the past, the other is living in the present and influencing the future. Got it? So again, we win because we're still evolving and growing and contributing, and they're trying to rely on something that happened in the past. They do have a primitive mindset. I have said this before, and they just are resting on what somebody did in the past that they really don't know anything about because most of these cultures are attributed to East Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia, and of course, Mali. We can give them credit for what was done in the past, but they're not doing anything now. And let us not forget that our ancestors were a part of those ancient African cultures. They made contributions in the past, and we're still making contributions to world civilization now in the present. So these things need to be pointed out because people act like they don't have good sense or they think we don't have good sense. So, you just have to lay it out there. Now, I don't want this video to be too long, but I did want to bring some facts. And I do want to talk about literature, Black American literature, because Black American literature is now studied in universities worldwide, contributing to broader discussions on race, history, and identity. And then, of course, media and pop culture. Narratives from Black literature have influenced film, music, and art globally. What I really want to emphasize in this video is that we have a global impact. People can come over here and start trying to make an argument with us about this, or you don't have this, you don't have that. The reality is we have a global reach that they don't have. So there's really no point to argue with them, but we do need to point out facts. Last but not least, I want to look at the poverty rates, because there is the perception that all Black Americans are poor. And so let's just clear it up. The poverty rate in Black America is 17.1%. That means that 82.9% of Black Americans live above the poverty line by American standards. And yes, 17.1% is high, but the poverty rate in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, is 41%. And for Black Caribbeans in 2023, approximately 32% of people in the Caribbean live below the poverty line. Poverty rates in the Caribbean range from 21% in Trinidad and Tobago to 81% in the Dominican Republic. Overall, the Caribbean is one of the poorest regions in the world, with Haiti being the poorest country in the region. There is 1,790,000 Black American millionaires. 46% of Black Americans are middle class. 9% of Black Americans are upper class. 45% of Black Americans are lower, middle to lower class, making from $30,000 to $58,000 a year. And below $30,000 a year for a family of four is considered poverty. So there are more billionaires and more millionaires and more middle income Black Americans than there are Africans or Caribbeans. Again, we shouldn't have to bring these things out, but when people want to come over here and talk shit, then we need to talk facts. Here in the United States, we can do better. We have our problems. We never said we didn't have problems. We have our problems. But if you're looking at us as an ethnic group who has come through one of the worst experiences a people can come through, we're doing well, and we're doing better than any Black people in the world. Let us be really clear. I'm going to end on that note. Black Americans are doing better in all areas than any Black people in the world. So they can come here running their mouth and popping off all they want to. We are doing the best. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.